Well, good morning, and thank you everyone for hanging out with us into the third hour. We're close to the end. My name is Nancy Barba, and I'm a director with Frontier. And Frontier Energy designs, implements, and evaluates programs that help local governments, regional energy networks, community choice aggregators, and utilities achieve their energy and climate goals. Frontier Energy is a proud member of the Tech Clean California team. And today I'll be presenting on some of the results of the heat pump water heater permitting pilot, which is a collaboration between the tech team and BayREN. So the heat pump water heater pilot goals are threefold. Single-day permits for heat pump water heater replacements of gas water heaters, a prime building department staff that can process those permits in that timeline, and finding those replicable solutions to achieve one-day permitting across California. So a bit about the permitting analysis, which is a part of the pilot. We completed this permitting timeline analysis for tech heat pump water heater claims that came through the program from December 2021 through February 2023. So first, I want to say that any of the results I show here is limited to that time span. The data source are these tech claims. So this is not representative of all of the other heat pump water heater that occurred outside of tech. The methods involved in this analysis was first identifying the jurisdiction for each of these tech heat pump water heater installations, analyzing the timelines to permit issued, and then conducting some informal surveys of jurisdiction staff. So first, while we talk about the kind of geographical distribution, so these heat pump water heater claims are for single family or less than 5-unit buildings. And you'll see in this map, in this heat map, that a big part of the concentration of these claims was in the San Francisco and Sacramento metropolitan areas. During this period of tech, the adoption was mostly concentrated in these areas, and therefore these study results are not representative of the processing timelines for other regions in the state, or at least not largely representative of those others, because again, most of the claims were in these areas. So a little bit about permitting timelines. It's important to note for those of us that are not with jurisdictions or work as part of building safety and building permitting, that the key milestones that we found in this permit data were 5 of these 5. So these are in the little box to the right. Those were application date, and these are all associated with dates in publicly available databases. So application date, approval date, permit obtained date. And then the other 2 are permit finalized and permit expiration. So for the sake of our analysis, we really focused on the permit obtained, because that is the date that it's issued and the project is authorized to begin. So really the critical milestone we're looking for that one-day permitting is permit obtained. But by looking at the various milestones, we were able to perhaps see some interesting things with the data and also discover kind of the variations across jurisdictions and regions. So what did we learn about the permitting timelines? Some key takeaways is that of the claims, we were able to associate with jurisdictions, and these jurisdictions had publicly available data on their permitting process. Those were 570. So these 570 permits, 58% of them were able to do one-day or same-day permitting. So that's great, 58%, pretty high number. However, that means that 42% were taking 2 days or more to issue that permit. That's kind of on the permit and claim level. As for jurisdictions, we found that 14%, and there was 51 jurisdictions represented in this data set. 14 of them, or what is equivalent to 27%, were consistently, meaning 100% of the permits in their jurisdiction were issued a same day or 1 day permits. So again, that's great. However, the mean application to permit obtain is closer to 8 days. It's like 7.99 days. Mean is basically taking the average mean across all claim data, the 570. So that's not so great. But the good news is that 20 out of the 51 jurisdictions represented are able to do same day or 1 day permits for 75% of their heat pump water heater projects. So again, some really good news. And then as for BayREN jurisdictions, 50% of those jurisdictions achieving 1 day permit are in the Bay Area region. One of the questions that we tried to ask of the data, or one of our maybe theories, is perhaps it's a matter of how many claims or how many permits are going through the jurisdiction. And perhaps that kind of leads to faster approvals. Well, we didn't really see a correlation between volume and how fast permits went through systems. So we took, in this table, you'll see a list of jurisdictions that had 15 or more permits associated with tech claims. And you'll see some of the ones that had the most or the largest permit sample. Some, the percentage of those permits that are same day. Livermore's doing great with 100%, but perhaps, Elk Grove has a different process. So one thing to note is that as much as we would like to rely on the data 100%, is that unless we know and we work with jurisdiction to understand when do they enter the dates, different processes, it's quite possible that more jurisdictions are achieving this, but it could be a procedural kind of data input situation that is perhaps making their numbers to permit issued look higher than they really are. So that's important to know, because all we have access to is that publicly available data. Then I want to quickly go over some key takeaways from informal surveys we conducted. So as part of this data analysis, we had those 51 jurisdictions for which we had associated permits and claims. And we then did informal interviews and phone calls with these jurisdictions. We found something very obvious that I'm sure everyone here knows, but there's a lot of regional variation of plan check requirements. So some jurisdictions require it, some don't. There's a lot of variation in familiarity with heat pump water heaters. Some of the staff we spoke to said they weren't knowledgeable of those types of systems and technologies, and some considered themselves very knowledgeable. Coincidentally, a lot of it had to do with had they seen one, do they have one installed at home, which we thought was particularly interesting. Staffing levels in the jurisdiction seemed to be something that a lot of the jurisdictions brought up, how well they're staffed or how well they felt they were staffed. Trust and accessibility to resources was also key. Like, who did they get their resources from? A lot of them said, their local chapters, and some of them said CC, Blueprint newsletter as an example, but some of them said, oh, we get it all from our director. So I think that exposure to trusted tools is important. Another interesting find was that some jurisdictions differentiated between switching from gas to heat pump water heater or electric to heat pump water heater, and some didn't. Some treated water heaters as water heaters, and they were able to provide same day permitting because they basically saw them as a water heater. And then finally, and very important to note that this is not jurisdictional alone. It's a lot of it has to do with the contractor expertise, because a lot of these delays could be that the contractor is working through some incompleteness or errors or issues on the permit form. And with that, I will pass it over to Karen.